Welcome back to my channel. It's time for another dormitory story. Without further ado, let's begin today's story. I attended high school at a private school. It was winter. I only remember that the dormitory was especially cold during that time. And a few days before that night, I had already started feeling something was off. I slept on the bottom bunk, and the ladder was right next to my pillow. During the noon naps, just as I was about to fall asleep each time, I felt like someone was looking at me through the ladder. But when I opened my eyes, there was nothing there. This feeling lasted for 2 or 3 days. I could feel that the gaze was getting closer each time. Eventually, I even felt that the person was stretching their head through the ladder, almost touching my face. But when I opened my eyes, there was still nothing there. That night, I went to bed early. Around midnight, I woke up unexpectedly. High school was exhausting. I usually sleep soundly through the night. I've never woken up in the middle of the night like this. I saw a patch of light on the wall across from the lower bunk and realized that John, who sleeps there, was still playing on his phone. I turned over to face the wall, thinking to myself how he was still on his phone so late. No wonder he can't get up in the morning. As I thought about it, I was drifting back to sleep. Suddenly, I felt that gaze again. This time, it felt even closer, as if it were right against the back of my head. I immediately started sweating with fear. My neighboring roommate, Chris. I quietly called his name. Chris. Chris. Chris woke up and asked what was wrong. I said I was a bit scared and wanted to sleep with him. He agreed. I mustered the courage to turn over, and of course, there was nothing there. Chris moved over to make space so I could lie down next to him. So I lay down next to him. But soon after lying down, I started having stomach pain. A focused, sharp pain. It felt like I'd never had such pain before. I clutched my stomach and sat up, getting ready to go to the bathroom. Chris, who hadn't fallen asleep yet, said he'd come with me. The bathroom was on the other side of the dormitory. I clutched my stomach and almost ran to the bathroom. Chris followed right behind me. While I was squatting, I casually asked Chris what time it was. He looked at the watch on his wrist and said, 4:20. I thought it's still early and that I could get some more sleep when we got back. When I finished in the bathroom and came out, Chris was still waiting by the door. I held onto his arm as we walked back to the dormitory. My stomach pain had subsided and my pace slowed down, but I could clearly feel that Chris was walking faster and faster. I was a bit puzzled. I was about to ask him when I noticed his face had turned pale. He made a silent gesture, looking very serious, indicating me to be quiet. At this point, I didn't dare say anything either, and quickly followed him back to the dormitory. As soon as we got back, he went to his bed, lifted the blanket, and asked if I still wanted to sleep with him. Recalling his pale face from earlier, I suddenly felt a bit scared, so I politely declined and returned to my own bed to lie down. As soon as I lay down, I saw John on the opposite side. Still had his phone's light on, to lighten the mood. I called out to him and said, "Still on your phone this late? You're not going to be able to get up tomorrow." John didn't move at all. Seeing that he ignored me, I didn't say anything else and just lay down to sleep. The next day at noon, we went back to the dormitory for a nap and chatted about last night. Jokingly, I said to John, "No wonder you can't get up every morning. You stay up so late playing on your phone. How can you possibly get up?" But John looked horrified and said, "Something strange happened last night." He said he went to sleep early. Then he started telling us what happened from his perspective, about what occurred last night. Recently, John started dating a boyfriend. They're in the honeymoon phase. Every night, they chat on their phones until very late. Last night was no exception. He was texting his boyfriend and asked, "Where are you?" At that moment, Sam, who was in the bed next to him, suddenly said, "I'm hiding under the bed." John was startled and glanced over at Sam's bed. He saw Sam was sleeping soundly and thought he must be talking in his sleep, just coincidentally answering his question. So he continued texting his boyfriend and asked him again, "What are you doing?" He had just sent the message when he heard Sam say again, "I'm sleeping." At that moment, John started feeling that something was off. He raised his head and asked Sam, "Who are you talking to?" Sam said, "I'm talking to Alex." Alex is my upper bunk mate, which means he's diagonally across from John. John looked over at Alex, who was also sleeping soundly, and said, "Stop joking around. Alex has been asleep for a while." But Sam insisted, "He's not asleep. If you don't believe me, call him." John called out a few times, "Alex, Alex." But Alex didn't respond at all. John said, "See, Alex is sleeping. Stop messing around and just go to sleep." At that moment, however, Sam called out, "Alex." To John's surprise, Alex immediately replied, "I'm awake." But the voice sounded really stiff. It didn't even sound like Alex's usual tone. John started feeling scared and said, "Stop messing around, you two. Just go to sleep." But no one responded. The whole dorm was eerily quiet. At this point, John was thoroughly frightened. He didn't dare play on his phone anymore and quickly stuffed it under his pillow and tried to sleep. But while he was recounting this story, Sam quickly shared what he saw at that moment. His description made us even more suspicious that something strange had indeed happened last night. He said that he woke up groggy last night. He noticed a light coming from the foot of the bed, so he knew that John was playing on his phone again. He was about to remind him to go to sleep early when he realized he couldn't move. He had completely lost control of his body. Then he noticed that his mouth was opening, speaking, saying words exactly matching his conversation with John. But the words weren't what he wanted to say at all. He was fully conscious but couldn't control himself. He didn't even know why he was saying those words, until he finally called out Alex, then suddenly lost consciousness and fell asleep. At that point, we all looked at Alex in unison, but he just looked confused. He said he'd slept through the whole night and didn't know anything. Nothing happened at all. Finally, I asked Chris, "Why did you suddenly act so serious when we were coming back from the bathroom last night?" He said he didn't know either. He was just standing in the hallway and suddenly felt very scared, as if someone was staring at him. When he saw me coming out of the bathroom, he grabbed me and wanted to hurry back to the dormitory. But even after we returned, he still felt as if someone was watching him. So he asked if I wanted to sleep together and didn't expect me to decline. He just forced himself to sleep alone. We analyzed the whole incident together. A bunch of unanswered questions were swirling in our minds. Who was the one staring at me from behind the ladder? Who controlled Sam to talk to John? After John fell asleep, who was lying there playing on his phone? And who was staring at Chris in the hallway? Finally, we came up with a terrifying hypothesis. All the strange things that happened last night were out of sync. And one detail was that Sam lost consciousness right after calling out to Alex. And then Alex responded with, "I'm not asleep." Could it be that someone was actually the same person? discussing it this far. We were all terrified. In the following nights, we lay in bed, shivering with fear, afraid something strange would happen again. Thankfully, nothing happened after that, and it seemed like we weren't really affected by anything serious, like a classic group fever or anything. That's how it went. Then one night, I was woken up by my friend. He said he had a stomachache, asked me for the ring to go to the toilet, and I gave him the paper. Asked him if he wants me to go with him. He said no. Then he ran out like a gust of wind. After a while he came back. I asked casually what time it was. He raised his hand and looked at his iWatch. Said 4:20. Finished this sentence. We were both stunned. I can feel my goosebumps. It popped up in an instant. We tacitly didn't say anything. Lie down and continue to sleep. Fortunately, this night, nothing strange happened again. Save the best for the last. If you're scared, type the comment below. If you're not scared, type out your feelings. One time, my classmate finished school at 5:30. It was wintertime then. The sun set pretty early. Usually, we'd exit through the main hall after school, but a few of my classmates took a hallway behind the classroom, heading toward the computer lab, music room, and art room. That hallway doesn't have lights on at night. The only light comes from the exit sign, which glows an odd shade of green. They weren't really scared of going down that way, since they'd been at the school for a couple of years. There was a tall boy who did boxing, and a chubby one with a really loud voice, very tough. Another guy, we'll call him Mike, and a girl who was a bit chubby, too. When they got down to the first floor and walked back, Lucy felt someone yank hard on her backpack. She fell forward onto the ground. Startled, she looked back and saw something tall, with long hair, in a red outfit, standing at the end of the hallway. Everyone there was a friend, so they helped her up. And then Lucy noticed this red figure again, by the emergency exit sign. Its height was unusually tall, standing out in the green light. The boxer noticed it too, and they all panicked and ran. Afterward, the boxer said that his sister, who went to the same school, had encountered something similar when she went to the bathroom after evening study hall. Later on, we found out someone had reportedly jumped from the building in the past. This happened last year during the May holiday. Let me introduce myself briefly. I've always had a frail constitution, and am sensitive to odd things. Whenever I feel something's off, it's often a sign of trouble. Sometimes, I see unusual things, whether the first engage directly or ignore them. They generally don't dare to harm me. Usually, apart from getting a bit startled occasionally, nothing else happens. But the events of last May really left a significant impact on me. I'm a university student from another city, studying in Shanghai. Last year's May holiday was quite long, and knowing I wouldn't be in Shanghai for too many more years, I invited my mom over for a visit. My mom booked a hotel online, located in the Shui district. We planned to stay there during the holiday. The hotel room was on the second floor, and since I'm sensitive to these things, and it was just the two of us women, I was a bit particular about it. We repeatedly confirmed that there was nothing suspicious about the room, but one odd thing did catch my attention. The last digit of the room number was originally supposed to be 4, but the hotel had changed it to 5. I thought at least they avoided 4, so we checked in. After entering, the room felt clean and cozy. But there was something very odd. The room was unusually cold. though it wasn't that hot in Shanghai last May. It wasn't raining either. We shouldn't have needed sweaters and jackets indoors, yet it was chillingly cold. The room was street-facing and southward, with sunlight streaming in, but somehow, it felt cold as ice. I didn't mention it to my mom, but later she suddenly asked, "Don't you think this room is really cold? It feels a few degrees colder than outside." I was taken aback. My mom isn't someone who typically senses paranormal things. If even she felt cold, what could it mean? I didn't dare think too much about it, but I reassured both of us that maybe it was just Shanghai's weather, warming up but still humid, causing the room to feel damp and chilly. Plus, Shanghai is generally pretty humid, so feeling a bit cold wasn't unusual. Since it was afternoon when we checked in, we went out for a while, then came back to sleep. My mom is an early sleeper, so she washed up and went to bed, but I'm a night owl and was up watching my iPad. Around 11 p.m., there was suddenly a lot of noise outside the door. It sounded like someone pacing back and forth. Although our room wasn't at the end of the hall, there were only 4 rooms nearby, each with its own bathroom. The shared bathrooms were on the other side of the stairs, and all the washing areas were located there as well, so there was no need for anyone to pace right outside our door repeatedly. After about half an hour, the footsteps suddenly stopped, and I went to bed. Keeping my usual perspective on these things, I told myself they wouldn't harm me, so I didn't mention it to my mom. The next day, it rained, and my mom and I got a bit soaked, but we didn't pay it much mind. We ate some hot food, took a warm shower, and thought nothing more of it. I even made a note to check, and there were no footsteps that night. Only one of the surrounding rooms had occupants. The third day, April 30th, my mom suddenly developed a fever. She's usually very healthy and has never been like this before. I gave her the usual medication she takes, but her fever wouldn't break. The air conditioning was on high, yet she still felt very cold. We rested in the hotel for the day. On May 1st, she was still unwell, but had a bit more energy, so we took a short walk outside. Strangely, after going out, I noticed her overall health improved significantly, but as soon as we returned, she went back to feeling the same way, and I also started to feel extremely fatigued. The next morning, my mom suddenly said she needed to leave. She felt that this place was making her feel deeply uncomfortable, and the longer she stayed, the worse she felt. She sensed that staying would only make her sicker, so she quickly booked a flight and left. I went back to my dorm to rest. For some reason, since staying at that hotel, I'd been feeling constantly exhausted and just wanted to sleep. After returning and taking a nap, I also developed a high fever. I had to urgently request time off from school to go home. After going home and visiting the hospital with my mom, it turned out she only had a mild cold. She recovered in 2 days. I, on the other hand, had pneumonia, and it took me almost half a month to fully recover. During our illness, we went over the events that had transpired. My mom explained that she had felt uncomfortable the moment we entered that hotel, but after checking everything thoroughly and finding nothing obviously wrong, and since I hadn't mentioned any strange feelings, she hadn't thought much of it until she fell ill. And one night, a sudden thought entered her mind. If I don't leave, I might die in this room. It was as if a warning from beyond had reached her. And since I wasn't feeling right either, she chose to check out suddenly and go home. In the end, It was quite a terrifying experience. We almost ended up staying in that hotel for good. Later, we shared this story with our family and consulted with some friends about it, which confirmed that it was indeed something with the room. Apparently, anyone who stayed in that room would get sick, but would gradually recover once they left. This hotel stay experience has left us both haunted to this day.